one of the disciples recognized him. You would think by now that all of the disciples would be able to recognize Jesus. After all, this is the third resurrection appearance. You would think that once would be enough to convince the disciple that their beloved rabbi was not dead, but was alive and with them, always with them. Isn't it a curious thing that the disciples need more than one resurrection appearance? What is the point of it? Why does Jesus keep showing up over and over in the span of about 40 days throughout the gospel stories? Well, maybe he needed to truly convince the disciples and us that his promise to them to never leave them alone was a promise that he keeps. Some of you may have heard about this story this week. It's an amazing story of this little girl who was lost in the swamplands of Florida for 5 days. And you know what happens when little girls go missing after that period of time. Usually that has a very tragic ending, but not this story. Turns out that one of the guys who was a member of this little girl's church decided, he'd been part of the rescue team, decided to strike out on his own one early morning, right at dawn. And he carried with him a water bottle, his BlackBerry that had a GPS, some food in case he found the little girl, and his Bible. And he said that morning he got up, he prayed that God would be with him and guide him. So he entered the swamp deeper and deeper, calling, "Nadia, Nadia." For 2 hours he called her. And then once when he said, "Nadia, Nadia," he heard, "What?" The little girl had Asperger's syndrome, or a form of autism, and created kind of probably the way she went missing and the way that she responded. And he is now credited by her parents and the church community as a hero. He, though, continues to say that it was God who was leading him, guiding him, not leaving him alone, not leaving Nadia alone. Even after the disciples had lost their Easter enthusiasm, Jesus returns to feed them a meal of fish and bread. In this manner, he comes to them, cooking for them, waiting for them to recognize him, accepting them in their business as usual behavior, even joining them in their efforts. When Simon Peter understands that it is the Lord who is the stranger on the beach, remember, he laces up his Nikes and he puts on his camping clothes and he jumps into the sea. And after he and the disciples have hauled in the huge catch of fish, Jesus invites them to come and have breakfast. Jesus' food revolution had begun, and Peter met Jesus there at the campfire. It must have been an eerie feeling standing there with Jesus around a campfire, because the last time Peter was standing around a campfire, he was very busy denying the Lord not once, but 3 times. Jesus met Peter at the same shoreline where he had called him and his brother Andrew to leave their fishing business, to follow him to fish for people. And then they begin their curious conversation. Jesus asking Peter, not once but 3 times, "Peter, do you love me more than these?" It's as if it takes 3 times of asking Peter, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" to undo that which Peter had done, was to deny him 3 times. And didn't undo it for Jesus, but in order to undo Peter's denial, Peter's awareness that he truly has the capacity to love that Jesus was calling him to do. And the link between food and love should not go unnoticed here. We've all experienced the hospitality and love through the sharing of a meal. Certainly we had a lot of that this weekend with my friend. And it was actually when I was a little girl, my mom's way of telling me she loved me. She would ask me on my birthday, she said, "What kind of cake would you want?" And I always answered strawberry shortcake because it was in summer and the strawberries were ripe and it was delicious. And so after she'd cooked the meal that I wanted her to cook, she would inevitably bring out the strawberry shortcake. It was her way of showing me she loved me. And so when we have a death in our congregation, we know how to respond. This church really knows how to show their love. I mean, casseroles abound. They're everywhere. Food is delivered to help those who mourn, but also to say, you know, we love you, and God loves you. We are with you in this time. We will not leave you alone. Even though you do not feel like eating, even though you do not feel like breathing, we are here to remind you that you need to eat. And we need to remind you, and we need to remind you that we love you. Not only do we feed people when they're in deep grief, but with our love we reach out to those in our community who are in economic need by the work of our food pantry. And even though we sometimes struggle financially, God seems to keep an eye on us in this mission. This month, I don't know if you've heard, but we received a $5,000 food grant from United Way. So that's a very big blessing to help us to continue our love, to reach out to those in our community in need. It's as if we are responding to Jesus' command, feed my sheep. Jesus has been working at a food distribution center of his own when he invites the disciples to dine with him on the beach for breakfast. After a long night of fishing and coming to the break of a dawn empty-handed, Jesus invites them to cast their nets wide and deep, to come back to doing the work of the Spirit, to fish for people, to tend the sheep, to feed the lambs, to feed the people. Do you know how important that meal was? Jesus breaks bread and passes it around and does the same thing with the fish. Now, doesn't this remind you of another time when Jesus broke bread and handed out fish for dinner? Remember Jesus' feeding of the 5,000. He did that same meal there. Did he make this resurrection meal of bread and fish for the ones he loved as if to say, hey, disciples, do you get it yet? Did he have to keep coming back over and over as if to say, hey, disciples, do you recognize me yet? Or did he serve up that resurrection breakfast as if to say, hey, disciples, this is what you do for the world. Do you get it? Oh, church, do you get it? The third Sunday of Easter, we can begin to feel a bit of the post-Easter blues creeping back in. The lilies are gone. The hallelujahs are quieting. The Easter baskets have been put back in the attic. But the light of Easter, that Easter light, still shines on this table of resurrected life. It is here that we are invited, along with the disciples, to taste of Jesus' food revolution of love. It is here that we are fed for the journey. When Jesus tells us to cast our nets on the other side of Easter, they become filled to such capacity that we can't bring it all in to our little boats. Even if we have nothing to offer, Jesus will have something on the fire for us. It is here now. Can you see the Lord standing here inviting us to dine with him? Can you smell that resurrection breakfast? It has been prepared, and it is waiting for you to come to the table. And all you need to bring is you. Let's take a moment before we